Okay, hi you two. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Whoever shows up, shows up. If they don't show up, then they're missing out. So I'm still Desiree. That has not changed since things have started, since I last saw you folks. And then we also have...
I'm still Karen. I don't think I met you, but hey. No, just kidding. I'm still Karen. Glad you guys came. We appreciate it.
So today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. Either of you heard of it before? Great job. So with imposter syndrome, we're going to go over a few different things today. We're going to define what it is, just kind of really get into it. We're going to talk about some facts and just important things to know. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion, and then we'll wrap it up today with talking about some specific tools that you can use in order to work through imposter syndrome and be able to kind of assess what your needs are as time goes on. So a little bit of background about what imposter syndrome is, which I'm sure you folks are probably experts. Imposter syndrome is something that is talked about a lot, or at least it's been talked about a lot more in like recent years. So maybe you'll learn something a little bit new today, or maybe you'll be able to now spout some fun facts to your friends. So imposter syndrome is that internalized feeling of self-doubt and not belonging in a particular group that can lead to feeling like you're going to be a fraud. This can happen with your friends, this can happen academically, this can happen in any group. And so sometimes when you show up, you're like, yes, this is going to be so great, but then sometimes that little voice kind of pops up in the back that's like, well, what if? You know, what if these people find out? What if you're actually maybe not as smart as you think you are? What if you are not as nice as you think you are? And then you start to really doubt, you know, the things that you probably know to be true, but sometimes when that imposter syndrome pops up, it's kind of hard to shove that voice into the back. So this term was first described in 1978 by two different psychologists, Suzanne Imes and Pauline Ross-Clance, and it can be found amongst any person, amongst any group, but especially amongst high-achieving people. So hint, hint, wink, wink, you folks as medical students, this is going to be one of those things that you may find a lot as something that shows up for you. It can also range from a few weeks to also longer periods of time. So this can be months, years, days. Just because you feel it once, like that's okay. This is actually like a super normal process to feel imposter syndrome. And so if you do feel it, it's not a bad thing. It's just how do you then navigate it moving forward? So a couple of symptoms of imposter syndrome. One, being that lack of self-confidence. Like I said, you may think like you're super awesome, which you totally are, and you should definitely recognize that. But you might also feel what that lack of confidence is over time. You may begin to question. You may have some feelings of being inadequate amongst your peers or the people around you or your friends. You also might find a lot of comparisons to other people. You know, sometimes you can compare and be like, oh, I'm doing really well. But with imposter syndrome, not always the positive comparison. You might also experience any anxiety or depression that might show up as well, some self-doubt, and some negative self-talk to really question how capable you really are, which we're going to show you today, you super are competent, confident, and all of those things. So we're going to take a little bit of a quiz. This is not what the paper is for in front of you, but I'm going to go ahead and read some of these statements. Because you're eating, I'll be nice. I was going to make you folks stand up, but we're just going to go ahead and have you raise your hand. So I'm going to go ahead and read a few of these statements out, and then if this is something that you've experienced, go ahead and raise your hand. Karen and I will be participating as well. We want to be very transparent that this, like I said, impacts everybody. So this first statement here, you sometimes shy away from challenges because of some nagging self-doubt. We appreciate your honesty. So do you tend to chalk your accomplishments up to being a fluke, no big deal, or the fact that people just like you? Yeah, a little bit relatable for some of these. Do you hate making a mistake, being less than fully prepared, or not doing things perfectly? Yep, double-handed over there. Do you tend to feel crushed by even constructive criticism, seeing it as evidence of your ineptness? When you do succeed, do you think, phew, I fooled them this time, but I may not be so lucky next time? Yeah, a little recognizable. Do you believe that other people, students, colleagues, competitors are smarter and more capable than you are? And lastly, do you live in fear of being found out, discovered, or potentially even unmasked? So, a good amount. With this little quiz right here, if you raise your hand 5 or more times, you're probably experiencing some imposter syndrome. But that's okay. Like I said, this is not a bad thing. This is something that you're going to encounter in a lot of different areas, especially if you are a first-year med student. This may come up for you a lot. Or even as a second or third year, this doesn't always go away. But it's then how do you navigate it so that way this doesn't control your entire narrative or your entire experience as a med student. So this is one of the quotes that we found that honestly I just really like. It just says, we can't all be imposters, can we? Like, did we seriously all make it to med school as imposters? Did we seriously all pass our test because we were just faking it this whole time? Do we really have like this group of friends or this family of support or just any general support system because people have just been faking that they like us this whole time? Probably not. So there may be some moments where we do feel like an imposter, but it can't be all of us, right? Because in that case, what are we doing? All right, and then I'll pass it to Karen.
All right, guys. So they've done a lot of research on imposter syndrome because it's considered a behavioral phenomenon. So for the most part, they state that a lot of people experience it, so just not medical school, but at some point in your life, you're going to feel like an imposter. Sorry. So this is the cycle. There is a cycle to it. It's the imposter syndrome cycle. And I don't know if you guys can see it, so I'll read it. A new project or task. So there's really this innate fear or concern. For instance, if you're coming in to do a new task, if you have a new assignment and you start working on that assignment and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this, or I shouldn't be here because I don't know it perfectly. And you all, again, are all students. And then it leads into anxiety or procrastination or over-preparation. And even when the project completion, a brief relief and sense of accomplishment. Rationalization, I was lucky. Somebody else would have done a better job. And increased self-doubt, anxiety, feeling like a fraud. So it goes this way, but up here, with the anxiety, the procrastination, or over-preparation, a lot of times you either feel like you need to be perfect or you're not able to do it. So either you try to overperform or you avoid and you underperform. So that's the cycle. Research findings. Observed high rates in women and people of color. Negative relationships between resilience and imposter syndrome. And can be comorbid with anxiety and or depression. An increased age associated with decreased imposter syndrome. I found this to be interesting because as you get older, you stop really worrying about what other people think or what you've done or how you've done it. You kind of start recognizing and not disqualifying the positive attributes about yourself. You start improving and acknowledging them. So that's the part that I thought was very interesting. High rates in women and people of color. Often, when I researched a little bit more about that, and it's because that population is typically underserved. They're the underserved population, or they're not necessarily, there's not a lot of people in the positions that women and people of color are in now. And so there's this idea that, oh, I got here, and so I have to be perfect because I really don't belong here because it's never been for this group of people in society. So I thought that was also very interesting. Okay. And then breaking it down, 75% med students who experience imposter syndrome, 22 to 60% med students who experience burnout, and 61% of medical students who experience anxiety. So initially, imposter syndrome leads to these other areas that can affect you negatively. Okay. Areas of life that are impacted. Work performance, taking on too many or too little responsibilities. Self-doubt, lower self-compassion, self-esteem. Social ability, a lot of times you avoid being out with people or you can over-engage in social activities because you want people to believe something about you that's not true, so you kind of overdo that in that area. Attributing success to outside factors. A lot of times we have students that say, oh, I only got in because they were accepting students of this type, but I didn't really get in on the merit of my score. Job dissatisfaction and burnout, and avoid seeking promotion because there's a fear of if I get this and I don't achieve, then they're going to figure out that I'm not who I say I am or what I present myself as. And loss of focus in tasks and responsibilities. All right, group discussion.
Okay, so that's just kind of like a general overview, of what imposter syndrome is, the people that it can impact. So we wanted to sort of have a little bit of a group discussion to sort of see your thoughts, what you think about this. So first question for you folks. Have we ever felt imposter syndrome? Has anyone seen an increase or experienced it for the first time since getting to med school? Couple folks. How about you folks? You're professionals. Do you also experience imposter syndrome? No. No, never.
So give us what it is that makes it successful.
This increased age?
Yeah, is it an increased age?
It's
This is my boss, he's amazing, I must say.
it's the gray beard, actually, is what does it.
So we've experienced it a little bit more than maybe in med school, maybe even for the first time, because now you have all these professors who are looking at you, or you are experiencing these new skills for the first time, and you may be walking into a space where people in your class have experience coming in, and you maybe don't have that same experience. So maybe somebody worked in a doctor's office before, PT's office, or literally anywhere else, shadowed a dentist. And then you come in maybe not having those same experiences and potentially automatically disqualify yourself because you're like, well, I'm maybe not as competent as I should be. These people did all these shadowing opportunities and I'm just showing up as a student. But you're also all starting off at the same spot. Everybody comes in, same thing, first day of school, you're all taking the same classes at the same time. So there are different types of imposter syndrome that do show up in a lot of different areas, but we can talk about that one a little bit later.
Okay. So if you want to, anybody, you don't have to, but the third question is, what do you currently do to combat imposter syndrome? Anybody want to share? Yes, young lady.
I try not to compare myself. So like if I'm worrying about like my classmates, who are great by the way, if I'm focusing on my own work, I don't have time to focus on what they're doing. So therefore I can't tell if they are more ahead or not, or are more competent because I'm focused on my own stuff.
Very good. So that's that word that you come up, mind your business.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Question 4. What would you tell a friend who had these feelings? You guys ever encountered any friends that have had the imposter syndrome feeling? What would you tell them? Yes.
I think that this kind of ties into what Desirai was saying, and also it's an answer to number 3 of one of the things that I do is remind myself the flip side of that argument of I haven't done all of these things, but what have I done to get myself here? And then combating the feeling, saying, okay, I have done this, and I do have this, so I don't have all the skill sets that the accumulation of everybody in my class has, but I am really good at this, remembering that this is something that I have.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else want to share? You want to repeat it?
Must be you to repeat it since you have the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to slip that slide back, but we'll talk about that later.
Oh.
But you want me to repeat the question and let her answer it?
No, just wanted you to repeat her answer so that
Okay. All right, great. So since I turned 56 today, my brain is not operating at high capacity. Could you please repeat your answer? I got the gist of it, but repeat it one more time.
Oh, yeah, just try to remember the things that I have accomplished, and that's the same thing I would tell a friend, but look at the things you have done, look at the things that have gotten you here, and the assets that you have,
So essentially, you're going to remember your own personal accomplishments, recognizing that you are still a student, you're here to learn, and that you don't have to necessarily, you don't have to compare, not necessarily, you don't have to compare yourself to anyone else. Just embracing your being here, your student, and acknowledging that you got here and you're able to do this at your pace and recognizing your strengths. Thank you.
Karen, as a counselor, what would you tell somebody who was having these feelings?
Which one? This one? About the feeling? I would probably say, honestly, focus on yourself. You did the hard work to get here because the trend is, again, all of you had a dream, you have a goal. The only thing that you don't know is in the journey. But even when you started with that dream, you were always told you got to compete, you got to get this, you have to hit this mark. If you don't hit this mark, then you're not going to be able to get in. And if you don't get in, you won't get in. Because I'm hearing a lot about I can't get into the residence program. I'm hearing students say that now, I can't get into my residence program, or I didn't get a 90 on the test, so somehow or another I don't deserve to be here. Or I got an MCAT score that was such and such, and so they only let me in because it was pity. And then they don't do well, and it's like I don't deserve to be here. What I like to say is, don't ever disqualify the positive. That is the biggest problem when it comes to not dealing with imposter syndrome. You've got to acknowledge the things that got you here. You have to understand that, one, you're a student, so you're not supposed to know it all. So that's exactly what I would say. You're a student. You're here to learn. You get an opportunity to repeat back what they're teaching you, but at the same time, nobody's expecting you to be perfect because you're here to learn. That's what I would say. All right, twos.
All right, so a couple of different tools to potentially combat some imposter syndrome, and also to answer question number 4 too. Something that I would probably tell folks if they're experiencing imposter syndrome is asking yourself, who told me that? You know, if I'm having this thought in my head, who told me that I'm not as good as my classmates, that I am going to do poorly, that I am going to be bad in my medical field? More often than not, you're probably like, ooh, I told myself that. You know, my professors didn't tell me that. My friends didn't tell me that. That's my own internal dialogue. And that also comes into this right here, separating those feelings from those facts. You know, the fact is, you got here. The fact is, you are still putting in the work. There's a lot more facts that represent what's actually happening and how great you are versus any of those potential feelings that we might be having. So being able to separate those out. Also, potentially creating a success log. Literally write down your accomplishments. Anything. It doesn't have to be a big accomplishment because then that's disqualifying any of the other things that you think are important. Just because it's not a big accomplishment doesn't mean that it's not noteworthy. You know, put the fact that you slept 8 hours the night before your exam. That's an accomplishment, that you drew a boundary. The fact that you got a B, just because you didn't get an A, doesn't mean that a B is also not still great. So write down all of these successes that you have for yourself. Number 3, stop comparing. It's going to be hard, and this might be easier said than done, but try not to compare yourself to other people. You can compare yourself to maybe you from a month ago. You know, you from a month ago, how would you have responded if you had failed a test? How would you have responded if, you know, you were feeling stress? And maybe now you today has all of those skills that you want and or need to feel more good about things, to feel a little bit less of that imposter syndrome that may show up. Number 4, talk to others, including us. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Talk to your friends. Talk to the people in your classes. Talk to people in other programs. Just because you are in X amount of program doesn't mean that you can't literally walk to somebody with a different scrub color and just talk to them in general. Normalize the feeling of feeling overwhelmed sometimes. Talk about it. Put a name to it. That way you're not battling this by yourself. Find a mentor potentially. Could be one of your professors or faculty. It could be somebody out in the field, just to talk about that as well, because I guarantee they felt it. Karen and I were talking earlier. We were raising our hands right along with you about us experiencing imposter syndrome. And that 6th piece, remembering that constructive feedback is not criticism. Sometimes when we hear feedback from people, we take that really personal, as like a character trait or personality flaw. Sometimes it's just your professors making sure that you can do what you need to do. It is not always a bad thing to get constructive criticism. Being able to separate out, like, oh, they're telling me this because they want me to do great, versus they're telling me this because they think I suck, or they think I'm terrible, or they don't think I'm enough, or that I'm not as good as my classmate. Your professors just want to see you be successful. We want to see you be successful. These folks over here want to see you successful. Michael wants to see you be successful. All these people in this room want to make sure that you have that support that you need. And sometimes that's going to involve a little bit of criticism or feedback. Is feedback. So we're going to talk a little bit then about fixed and some growth mindset.
So I'm not going to stay on this long because if you all came to orientation, we talked about this a lot. And the goal is just not to stay in the fixed mindset. It means exactly what it said. It's just a very, how do I want to say it? It's a mindset where you don't allow yourself to move. You don't allow yourself to make mistakes. You don't allow it's very strict. And we don't want to live in a fixed mindset. We want to live in a growth mindset. And I say this to students all the time in medical school and all of the programs. You're going to be practicing medicine for the rest of your life. So you're not going to be perfect. It's not going to be anything that you should be seeking to achieve. Do you want to know the knowledge? Absolutely. So when Des was talking about the last bullet point on the last slide, the criticism, that's where a lot of students get hung up. So you want to think, what is the intent of the message that I'm getting? Not so much the messenger. What is behind this? Do you really want me to succeed? Or am I going to take this and say, oh no, they're saying that I'm an awful student, and so your mindset is fixed? Or are they saying this is an area where you can grow? And that's where you want to stay. Thank you, Des. Okay. All right, attributing success to an innate ability. So basically, some people believe when they're born, they can only achieve to this degree. They're absolutely stuck there. That's one side of the argument. The other one is that a lot of times in that mindset, they can't grow. There's no possibility. I can only do math up to college, and I can't do math after that. I hated math, so I use that example of myself. Growth mindset. Attributing success not to an inherent talent allows for growth and development, and this is key. You want to always grow and develop. That's what you're going to be doing throughout your career and as an individual. The power of not yet. Like a new school, obtaining a growth mindset takes practice. It gives you a path to move forward and process error, learn from it, correct from it. So I have this slogan that's called keep it moving. Even in a negative mindset, even if you fail a test, that doesn't make you a failure. That means you get an opportunity. What did I do that I need to do differently? How do I need to study so that I can move forward? Don't be stuck in that one mindset that because I failed, I am now a failure, I cannot be a doctor. We definitely don't want to stay there. All right, so how do you reframe? Yes, the thing. So everybody should have there should be 3 pieces of paper here. I want you to take the first one. We're going to take a quiz. It's called the mindset quiz. When you're done with the quiz, let me know before we move on to scoring your quiz, okay? So the first 2 sheets that are stapled are your mindset quiz. And then after you do that, just kind of look up and let me know that you're done, and then we'll score it. And then we'll go to the next section.
For folks who are watching this online, you folks are fine. For anybody who watches the recording later, you can connect with one of us, or we will make this quiz accessible so that way people can take it.
All right, so we will go ahead and move forward. There should be another sheet that says Mindset Quiz Scoring Guide. So let me say pay close attention because question 1 and 2 are not next to each other. So you have to pay, the first one is question 1, and then the section below has question 2. So make sure that you're putting the correct answer next to the correct question. Okay, so I'm going to say that again for the video. Make sure that you are putting the correct answer next to the correct question. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that and tally your score. All right, would anybody like to share their points? You don't have to. I'm going to read out what they say. So 60 to 45 points, strong growth mindset. 44 to 34 points, growth mindset with some fixed ideas. 33 to 21 points, fixed mindset with some growth ideas. And 20 to 0 points, strong fixed mindset. So you don't have to share, but hopefully a lot of times I think it's important when you know better, you can do better. And some of you may have never taken this. You may know that you have, what your mindset, you may think you have a strong mindset, but doing something like this will actually help you so that you can combat imposter syndrome. So thanks for doing that, and I'm going to pass it over to Des.
Okay, so what we're going to do then is talk about how do we reframe some of these thoughts that we may be having. So reframing some imposter thoughts. So we have this column right here, says sounds like. So this might be the initial thought that you have. You know, why me? What if I'm not good enough? Something bad will happen to erase all of the good that's happening. You know, if I fail a test, it completely negates every single thing that I did before this that was probably really good. People will think I'm not good enough. I won't be able to live up to everyone's expectations. Or just flat out, I don't deserve this. Now, some of the ways that we can potentially reframe that, this first one, why me? Try this. I am in spaces that I deserve to occupy. I am allowed to be here. Why me? Because I passed. Because I did the same entrance exam that everybody else did. Why me? Because I'm awesome. Honestly, sometimes you just have to be your best hype person. Even when you don't feel like it, sometimes full throttle, go for it, support yourself in any way that you can. What if I'm not good enough? My success is not due to luck. Your success is due to the hard work that you did to get here. Your success is due to the fact that you probably sacrificed some sleep, but that's a different conversation. But it is due to the amount of effort that you put into this. Something bad will happen to erase all the good. I am all the positive things that people say about me and more. It is very easy to listen to that voice that's just super hypercritical, and sometimes that little voice that goes, no, you're super great, is really quiet. Sometimes we have to give it the space to actually be as loud as it possibly can be. People will think I'm not good enough. Straight up, I am enough. That's it, point blank, period, done. You don't always need to have everyone's validation because let's be real, it's really hard to get that. You may not feel or like meet everyone's expectations or do all of these things. Do you have to? Do you need to? What about if we recognize the fact that we're also just great, that we have our own dopeness that we can talk about? I'm here because of my hard work, which you are. Let's be real, I'm not going to go to medical school. So the fact that you folks are here in this environment says a lot about you and all the effort you put into it. Or I don't deserve this. I've worked hard for what I have. That's true. I don't think I could look at anybody who goes to med school or literally does anything in life and be able to tell them, you don't deserve this. So then why are we telling ourselves that we don't deserve this? Being able to restructure that thought that I have worked hard, that I have done what I needed to do to be here. So some additional strategies, being able to reconnect with your why. Why are you doing this in the first place? What is your motivation to even going to med school? What's your motivation to make connections, to make friends, to put yourself out there? Being able to have that strong why for just anything, that motivation that you need. Know and lead with some of your strengths. Your strengths can look like a lot of different ways. I keep my strengths on a Post-it note on my computer at all times. I've taken many strengths assessment tests, and they change every year. I have never taken the strengths assessment test and gotten the same answers. Last year was all in one category, so that was cool. I maybe need to figure that out. But that just goes to show that your strengths are going to change as you grow as a person. And then being able to utilize those strengths when you can. And then that third, being able to connect to your values. What are the things that you hold dear to you? What is important for you? What is this value that is keeping you going? You know, I value being humorous in life. I will try to laugh at anything, and I try to lead into that with a lot of the things that I do. Am I funny to everybody? No, but I'm still going to do it because it's something that I value. So this is a quote right here that I really love. I think it's great. It's something to potentially keep in mind, but it's from Valerie Young, who talks a lot about imposter syndrome and is a co-founder of the Imposter Syndrome Institute. So she knows what she's pretty much talking about. But this quote right here, everyone loses when bright people play small. Everybody in this room, everybody who watches this recording later, anybody at all times are bright people. And it doesn't help when we put ourselves on a smaller category or pedestal. You know, when we play small, who really is impacted by that? Your relationships, your self-esteem, all of these other areas that we're talking about. So something to kind of just keep in mind. maybe this quote sticks with you. Maybe it shows up 5 years later and you're like, ooh, I remember when Desirai said that. Or, oh, I remember when Karen said that. It can be just kind of surprising, any of the things that we talked about today. So we do have, there's another sheet of paper that you have in front of you. In the nicest way possible, it's homework. But you're going to be fine. Here's out.
Yes, this one, I believe you're your own best hype person. Nobody can hype you up better than you can hype yourself. And so that's what this homework assignment is. So if you want to do it before you leave, that's fine. But we really want you to do this because information is great, but application is key. So please, 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 it's really simple. It's just asking you things that you're good at, how I developed a skill, and how would I like to improve? Because when you know who you are and you define yourself by what you believe about you, the facts, not the imposter stuff, but the facts, then nobody else can define you. And I really think that's the key to how you live out your life and you deal with imposter syndrome. Because we're not saying this goes away. It's going to hit you at any point. But you got to learn to define yourself by what you believe about you and what you can become. So thank you guys for coming. Please do your homework assignment. Keep it somewhere so that you can remember it. Affirm yourself. And remember, you're not an imposter. You deserve to be here. That community is going to need you guys 4 years from now, 5 years from now. I'm not sure which programs y'all, when y'all are done. But the 2027 class, 2026 class, whatever, you're needed. So just remember, you deserve to be here. You're a student. You're learning. And I'm going to leave it with, we have Desiism and Karenisms. I'm going to say Desis. If you're going to play the what-if game, play both sides. And then mine is, it's not a real word, but it's called, the sentence is, go be greatened. Greatened is not a word. Yes, I made it up. I can. I'm that old that I can do that. But what it implies is that you're always evolving. You're always becoming great. So let's end this by remembering, play both sides, not just the negative, play the positive, and go be greatened.